This is a mock-up that I did after seeing Star Wars: The Force Awakens. I had seen the trailers, got really excited about the movie, even though I'm not really, a proper hardcore Star Wars fan, and I did really enjoy seeing the trailer. That was the first thing that really ticked me. And what I wanted to do in this mock-up was to simulate what a game would look like if it was made in the 90s, and it was based on the Force Awakens. So I set out to create this kind of platform game with the backdrop of Jakku, where you see the big Star Destroyer. I hope that's what it's called. I don't want to offend anyone. Destroyed, laying on the sand, which at the beginning, as it starts to get into the shot, it kind of looks like a hill, and then you can see what it is. So it's a really nice surprise. And what I'm basically doing here is playing around with the color of the sand to get the idea of depth. Now, there's a bit of an error there. I forgot that I was using a pressure sensitive brush. And using the line art that I did, which is basically a sketch, I'm now filling in shapes. Lately, I've been preferring to work more with shapes rather than work with line art, because I've created this sort of different approach to it. So the issue here with Rey was that I wanted the pose to be dynamic. So she had to be kind of just expecting to jump into action. She would have to be holding the stick in a way that it wouldn't ruin the silhouette, but I didn't want it to look like hunched over. So there's even a moment here where I separate the head from the body to kind of just look at the body without the head, because the head has to be vertical. She has to be looking straight ahead. Otherwise, she's just looking down. So there we go with the head. I figure out that the stick is gonna have to be maybe in a different hand, because right now it's sort of going through the leg, so it's not really selling the layout for the leg all that much, because it's kind of going along with the shin. But if I do it like that, it goes across the leg, but it doesn't really disturb the silhouette of the leg all that much. So I'm kind of happy with this shape, and I start by putting in some base colors of what the outfit would be, and it's pretty directly based on the movie. Trying to figure out where the skin areas are. I remember that the legs are not symmetrical, and in some moments of the movie, the trousers, pants, whatever, are pushed up in one leg but not on the other one. And doing this, I just basically see what the shape of the character looks like, and the moment then comes to sort of shade it, and that creates the depth. But right now I just have the shape. So what I'm doing now is creating BB-8, and it's basically shading a sphere in the most simple approach possible. And I also do these selections that I set as, I think I set these as multiply, just for quickness. Have those in to act as the decorations on the droid. And then have a few decorations on top as well to simulate the sort of head, the top of the droid. There we go. And then going back to the character now, I'm trying to use some warm skin tones to make sure that it doesn't look like she's kind of faded. And this makes me jump into the shading as well. So I basically have the two characters. I now just need to make them a little more interesting than they are to start off with now. Being that I'm using kind of realistic proportions in this case, I'm not really going for a cartoon or a stylized look. I'm trying to get the proper, like in games like Another World or Flashback, where they use realistic proportions. There's almost no room for detail on the face, and that's why I'm trying to play around with just the silhouette of the cut line of the shadow. So I only get this enough information, enough space to put in the shadow side of the face, and then a brighter sort of area, which is the part of the face that's getting some sun. And then the break of the two also helps define the silhouette of the face. Now on the legs, I have a little bit more room, so I'm trying to create some folds on the clothing. It's almost like this kind of curtain effect on the pieces of clothing that are hanging from the belt, which I incidentally don't think I actually shade. The part of the Star Destroyer was the one that was most complicated, because I wasn't getting the angle right. I was trying to get the perspective to look okay, because I wasn't looking at reference. I was kind of thinking to myself, I can do this. I can do this without looking at reference. And no, always look at reference. I mean, it's just a better idea overall to just look at, if what you're trying to do exists, look at what it looks like. And it just got me enough that I could see what the shape was, and then I started focusing on creating almost like a proper video game where you have to use tiles to save up file space. So I basically put the grid on. And with this, I worked on one piece of terrain tile. And once I was happy with the shape of it, I started pushing it over to the other tiles around it. So everything looks pretty much a clone piece of set. But incidentally, I do have a few new sets for the corners and steps along the side. Now what I'm doing here is I'm creating this sort of front view shape, but this kind of makes the rocks look a little bit glossy, which is probably not what I'm looking for, because it makes them look like they were either damp or covered in some sort of water or clear coat, which is, it's not that dry look that the desert stones should have. And I'm spending some time here because this is going to be like the main one. If this works, then it will work on all the others. Then after I get this, it's the matter of trying to work on the pieces of tiles that are not similar. So what I'm doing there is just creating the whole tile and then adding texture to it by repainting the same areas or simulating the same areas, or just making sure that at least it obeys to the silhouette that I had previously drawn on the platforms. Just a little bit of texture there on the dune, and a little bit of cleanup here on the, I don't even know what it was. It's a sort of floating bike that she has, or her vehicle, basically. The problem is it kind of confuses, it kind of clashes a little bit with the main character, with Ray, so that's something I have to figure out how to fix. I think at this point I was maybe looking at reference, not sure. I might have popped in Google and tried to search for an image of it so that I did the seat right. Okay, and this is my solution for the clashing. I just give more contrast to the main characters so that they stand out a little bit better. I think I'm trying to copy the hairstyle also from Ray, but I don't want to exaggerate again, because if I do, then it becomes a little bit cartoony. That's not really something that I'm looking for. The other problem here is that I'm trying to draw a blue sky, but I have this sort of ochre color on the Star Destroyer, which means that the sky and the atmosphere should be the same color, because that's what it's tinting. That's why it's tinting the Star Destroyer that color. So eventually I figure out that I need to use this sort of yellowish sky, and that's what's going to give me the sort of the desert look with the sand fog or something like that. That will just tint everything in that sort of tone. Playing around with the colors a little bit. I mean, there's always time to fix the colors, especially if you don't use too many colors. You can always just change the palette and see what that makes it look like. In this case, I think I'm trying to redraw the whole ship because I just failed completely at the perspective, and I'm still trying to figure out what it actually looks like. And the issue here is that I don't want this to be a huge set piece, because if this was a real game in the 90s, then they probably would not have all those many tiles to work with. So I'm trying to find a way that this will make sense to it in a technical point like this. So that's why I have 30-degree lines. That's why I have big areas of flat color, because that would be what would happen in the real world if they try to do something like that. Or they would just do the ship way smaller in the background and not so big on the screen like I have it here, because that would take up a lot of tiles. So I just have that piece of sort of gray color, and then just have that stretched across or filled in that area, and then just have different tiles for the silhouette, which preferentially would be the same angle, so that you would still be saving tiles even though you're creating a shape. So there's a few piece of tiles here that I use that are very specific for that model. So it might be overall a bad idea to use them in like in a real video game situation, like that part of the spaceship that is broken, like an explosion happened. That will require their own tile, and some details here and there. But again, just trying to make sure that this fits the perspective, that it doesn't look out of place, and that I don't have all the detail that I would love to have, but just enough that this reads. Also, this isn't really going to be used in a game, so I have a little bit more freedom. But I do like to pay homage to the old limitations of the old computers and consoles. So one thing was missing from BB-8 was a bit of a highlight, because he is white. I think the paint is white, so it should be very hard to see a highlight on him in the desert, because he would be very bright overall, and that bright in my drawing, so had to change that in a little bit. The detail on the bike is pretty much, I'm just trying to get away with having Ray in front of it, and then I just kind of give up and say, you know what, she can't be there, yeah, she has to stand out, so I'm gonna have to eventually do something there. The other thing I really wanted to do was the interface, and I just do the portrait. It doesn't really look like Ray at the beginning, but then I do a few tweaks and it kind of actually does. And I was quite happy with this because I wasn't even looking at reference. So I just create, again, like on the smaller version, I just create a shape of the light part of the face. And then that is enough for me to get a sort of a portrait going. Now, the real actress who plays Ray has thinner eyes, not so big. So I eventually move some pixels up so that they aren't as bright. And I do want to make an expression of effort. So the mouth is slightly opened. And we do that by, instead of painting shadow, we paint a bright shade to show teeth. I decide to add a mid-tone between the perfectly bright and the perfectly dark skin tones, which actually help create another tone. So you see that by drawing the teeth, it reads as if she's doing an effort expression. Now, the nose is very short and the eyes are very big. And the way I fix that is just by, again, changing the proportions on the face by moving the part underneath the eyes up a little bit. And when I zoom out, that's when I realize it kind of doesn't look that much like her. But in this case, I actually kind of feel that it does a little. At least it does look like the character a little bit more if it was pixelated. Then I also add more interface elements, as well as a few potential power-ups. So I'm doing these fonts by hand and they're pretty much based on small fonts. So that's how the S is made, in small fonts. And then I do a sort of bold font using a 2-pixel thick line. And I'm trying a few classic arcade gradients here, but they don't look good. They don't look good at all. They look out of place. Not that they're bad, but they look out of place. And also another thing that I'd like to measure would be the force for some reason. And the force would be like your mana bar. So what I'm going to do is a blue bar and then have a few colors in to suggest that it's like a very bright, sort of glossy, semi-transparent bar, like a crystal, like a blue crystal or something like that. In this case, what I'm trying to do is I'm having some, rations, measures, portions, something like that. But the things that she cooks with or that she eats, those would be sort of like the coins that you would collect. And then I have an engine part or a spaceship part to be like a special power up, not another life, but maybe, a times 10 rations. I think it is rations. Portions. I don't know. I think I add that on the heads up display. I think it's portions. I don't know. But the problem here is that I want this to look glossy, but at the same time I want it to have some energy in. And what I'll eventually do is just paint this blue, but it kind of looks out of place because it's so much brighter than everything else. So I just make the rest of the blue a little bit darker, and that's good enough for it to stand out and as energy. Now I also added the outline, the orange outline, to kind of make it like a different thing, but not sure if that's the proper choice. So eventually that's what I came up with.